Sheila, I'm going to come to you, I think, just with time not on our side, looking ahead, policy, partnership, patient impact. What policy shifts do you think would most improve access to rare disease and treatments? And I know we've talked a lot around the need for policy change and systems change, but what's the first shifts that are going to make biggest impact?
Well, I think the first shift has kind of already happened in that we heard yesterday that there's an extension on the rare disease framework, which I think is great, which shows commitment from the government that they're still interested and wanting to take this forward. But I think we need to use this as a springboard for some of the other activities that we might want to kind of enhance and augment. I think we need to think about how we can leverage that to really find a place in the NHS 10-year plan. Because I feel at the moment well, I know that there isn't really any mention of rare in the NHS 10-year plan overall, but how can we kind of find a space in that piece so that actually when ICBs and other people who are implementing their operational plans, they are thinking about the rare piece. And I also think that we need to think about how we can collectively put together um, almost like I'm trying to think, a project or a research study that will inform the system about the things that need to shift around the kind of access and the NICE process and stuff. One of the things that I've always found really frustrating, and this is meant in the nicest possible way, is that we can criticize all we like, but if we don't come up with alternative approaches, then the system can't consider them. So, for example, the things that Kylie's talking about, it would be great to kind of put a proper project together where we could demonstrate how this would work in practice to some of the kind of suggestions around the changes that are needed, so that we can then show the impact that could happen if this was put in place. And then lastly, I think we need to think about how we can again hang on the NHS 10-year plan about the use of technology. So how can we immobilize technology to help with some of these uncertainty questions and build a stronger research environment so that service provision can become accessible as well as these new therapies? Because I think that the government's really keen on kind of enabling technology to become more useful in the healthcare system. And we need to find new ways of mobilizing that. So policy shifts around the use of technology would be really useful.
Yeah, and that comes nicely to you, Kylie. How is the BIA Rare Disease Industry Group engaging with policymakers to shape the future of the HTA and access frameworks?
Yeah, and hopefully I can actually give some leverage to Sheila's idea of a project around this as well. But yeah, I'm incredibly proud to be chair of for context, it's the Bioindustry Association's Rare Disease Industry Group. We represent 18 diverse companies of various stages and of medicines development and various size organizations, so a very diverse group. And crucially, we partner with patient organisations and clinicians to ensure that the lived experience for all the communities informs policy development. So I think that means we can offer a very unique perspective on both the challenges in the UK, but really importantly, as Sheila said, what are the opportunities for change and for improvement? So the group is actively engaged with key stakeholders, including Department of Health and Social Care, NICE, NHS England, MHRA, to evolve the health technology assessment methods and work towards the new UK rare disease framework. So BAA will contribute directly into that, which is brilliant. And just as a recent example, we met earlier this month with the new MHRA CEO, Lawrence Tallon, and I think I was really, I have to say, walked away from that meeting incredibly energized because he's clearly a champion for rare diseases. He's making some bold changes to the MHRA's approach on the regulatory end, which is really important. But we did call on him to work closely with NICE to ensure that the innovation on the regulatory end is also reflected in the reimbursement process, so that patients aren't left in limbo as they are today between those two processes. But I'm really excited that next month we're launching a new report, and that is about offering both evidence but consensus for action. So we're calling for faster, fairer, and more predictable access pathways for rare disease medicines, as well as I mentioned earlier, clear leadership in the UK to set that direction. So I think, Sheela, what I'm hoping is that report and the recommendations within that create food for thought for how we can potentially lift and shift some of those ideas and build off them for solutions. So I'm not professing that we have the answers, because collectively we need to come up with the answers, but I think that it really will set, certainly what we hope, a real more solutions focused framework for how we build for the future. And for all of us, achieving success, if you like, which is positive outcomes for patients in rare, does depend on all of us working as a collective with patients, families, clinicians, and industry. And I think RDIC can play a really critical role in this as a collective industry rare disease voice.
Yeah. It's great to hear that that's coming. So it'll be interesting to see, looking forward to seeing what the recommendations are. Charlotte, how can a more inclusive patient-centered HTA process exist? What would that look like for you?
That's a really good question. I think one of the areas that needs to be looked at is the involvement of patient experts within the HTA process. They play an invaluable role within those processes, but I think some of the conversations, especially in the NICE committee meetings, can be really difficult for patient experts to kind of follow along to and know where they can have the greatest input. I'd say one example is that I've been involved in many appraisals for a range of different conditions, but the one where I felt the committee really took into account and not just listened to what patient experts were saying, but incorporated it into the modelling, was where the patient expert was also a health economist in their day job. And yes, that's brilliant, and they gave such valuable insights into the process. But unfortunately, we're not going to have that for every single condition and every single treatment that's being appraised. So we need to make sure that we're supporting patient experts in order that they can have the most valuable contributions to those conversations. I think the SMC, the Scottish Medicines Consortium process with the PACE meetings is quite good at doing that. It gives a safe space for patients to be able to talk about their experiences and the experiences of treatments to do that. And then I think we need to also focus on the incorporating qualitative data better within these HA processes. We know that a lot of the data that we're getting comes from people living with them, and that we don't have that quantitative to back it up. So how can we incorporate that better? How can we make sure that the committees are choosing assumptions that are based on the reality of what people living with these conditions are going through every day? Because I think that's something that just doesn't come across in these guidance, that we don't have that. And a final one is just making sure that patients and patient organisations can understand the guidance that is coming out of NICE committee meetings as well. Yes, those guidance documents are generated for the NHS, but patients and patient organisations and their carers, families, we're all stakeholders within this process. We need to be understanding exactly where patient input has made a difference, how it's been incorporated into the cost effectiveness decisions, and understanding fully why that has led to a decision being made. And I think that's something that can be improved upon at the moment as well.
I think that's a really important point, Charlotte, having communications after a decision that are fit for purpose for all the stakeholders, not just the NHS, could be a really positive step. I'd like to get to one question if I can, but before I do, Nico, if you could change one thing tomorrow to strengthen healthcare industry collaboration, what would that be? What would be your big wish for moving this forward?
Given it's Christmas, the question is at the right time.
Yeah.
I will be super short. My big wish is that we listen to patients. Truly listen and take it into account in our decision making. I think it would make a massive difference.
Thank you. That's a really nice sentiment to end on. We do have one question here that I'd like to pull on. So the Vanessa Martin, Childhood Tumour Trust, has written in to say, as a patient organisation, we find pharma companies far more approachable than the NHS, yet despite a decade of meetings with ministers, MPs, NHS teams and policymakers, real change for conditions like NF1 hasn't materialized. Who are the people within the NHS who actually have the power to make improvements, and how do patient groups reach them? We seem to continually talk about things, how things should work, such as the rare disease framework, but what actually comes out of it in real terms for patients? So I don't know who wants to have a go at that one.
Maybe, oh, Nico, are you going to start?
Go ahead.
I think, Rebecca, in response to that question, I think it depends on what you want. So there are different stakeholders that you'd need to engage with for different parts of the system. So if it's more around, for example, service provision and how that's delivered and people are accessing it, then in this case, we're probably thinking about looking at ICBs and individual trusts that deliver those services and thinking about that. If it's more around kind of access to therapy, if there's therapies available, then we're thinking about, you know, the MHRA, the life sciences team in government and or NICE around some of those processes. So it's a kind of depending on the question in that we want to answer. And then I suppose it's also thinking about, well, it's not just campaigning for change, and Charlotte probably knows this better than I do, but it's also having the evidence to show that this is impacting in a way that is, you know, not helpful, that is having societal impact as well as individual and family impact as a result. So there are lots of ways to do this, and I'm sure that loads of patient organisations like MD UK have got great examples that they could help other patient organisations learn from. And of course, I'm sure all of us would be open to having a dialogue with those organisations too.
Because I think that it leads to that question, that sort of statement earlier, is that healthcare is such a narrow word for the organisation that it is. But I guess, you know, is there someone who is best placed that can support patient groups navigate that? Even just as you said, what's the question and who's the best person to go to? It's, you know, is there anyone that exists in the ecosystem that can support with that?
I think there's a range of people, and I think for me anyway, and I'm sure others will have a different opinion, but I think the rare disease community is very joined up. They work together. They want to share experience. They want to share knowledge. So I don't think there's anything wrong, for example, if people listening today picked up the phone or emailed any one of us and said, we have a question and we're not sure about this, and even if we don't have the answer, we're going to be able to connect those people up with people who might have the answer. And it's not like that in other health disease areas. The rare disease community is very much, look, I learned something, I want to share it, I want people to know.
Thank you, Sheela. I think that we could have talked all day. Good grief, what a topic. I don't know what we were thinking we were going to get that done in 60 minutes. But thank you everyone for really taking part. I hope the listeners have really enjoyed this conversation. For me, I've really taken away the need for accountability, the need for this kind of director for rare disease, somebody that really can champion and take on board that accountability. Priority setting and collaboration, another really big thing, and early engagement with the patient community, which of course we talk about a lot on this side of the advocacy setting. So thank you all very much for joining, for taking the time to speak with us. I hope everyone has very much enjoyed it. The recordings for this will sit on the resources page of our website in the coming weeks. So please do share it with your networks and anyone who couldn't attend live. And thank you all very much for joining. We hope you have a very good rest of your day.